Okay, so we finished with origins of prejudice. We're going to pick up here with effects on the victims. Effects of prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination on the victims. And the first one being perceived injustice. And this is a pretty powerful one. New York Times reporter introduced third graders to the idea of the Electoral College using a vote on markers versus color pencils. The markers clearly won with 2/3 of the vote, but color pencils won the Electoral College. The third graders were outraged. In fact, one little boy even tried to start a revolution. You might think the idea of justice is complex, abstract, processed in the higher brain, and thus uniquely human. But even monkeys are quick to perceive injustice and throw a screeching tantrum. Watch this video.
The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Research has found that persistent perceived injustice over time is associated with a number of physical and mental health problems, a particularly powerful effect. There are two major responses to perceived injustice. At first, the most likely reaction is reactance. Remember reactance? A protest, right? And if someone is not alone, this protest can lead to things like rioting, and in the most extreme cases, an attempt to overthrow those in power. Over time, though, if protesting has no effect, the response becomes learned helplessness. How precisely do you think the monkey would react if her protest brought about no results over time? How do you think she would show learned helplessness? Most likely she would stop working, stop even trying. Stop handing over those rocks, lay down, eventually face away, show lethargy, depression. Victims of prejudice can understandably become defensive, expecting others to be prejudiced and to discriminate against them. This can create a boomerang effect in that they lash out at others in anticipation of bad treatment, and this, in turn, causes others to treat them badly in response. Defensiveness can also cause victims of prejudice to devalue situations in which stereotypes apply, which can be harmful to them overall, such as African Americans devaluing a college education, the elderly devaluing memory games, women devaluing the sciences. Stereotype threat is a three-step model where knowledge of the stereotype against your group causes you to experience anxiety in stereotype-relevant situations for fear of conforming to the stereotype, which in turn causes poorer performance. Claude Steele named it this stereotype threat to emphasize how the threat is always hanging in the air. In one clever study, researchers pitted two stereotypes against each other. White men can't jump, and African Americans are unintelligent. Black and white students played miniature golf, and the game was first either characterized as a game of natural athletic ability or sports intelligence. The black students did better in the former condition, while the white students did in the latter. Among many other studies demonstrating stereotype threat, the elderly did much better in a memory test when it was introduced as an impression test compared to when it was introduced as a memory test. Stereotype threat. And then we have attributional ambiguity. Being regular victims of prejudice can cause the victim to doubt the sincerity of feedback they receive. The tendency is to attribute negative feedback to prejudice and positive feedback to patronizing, in other words, reverse discrimination. When feedback is fair, it is valuable information we need to grow, regardless of whether it is good or bad. Thus, attributional ambiguity causes the perceiver lost opportunity to grow.